Hey guys, I just wanted to do a quick review of something that some of you might be interested in or even have thought about experimenting with while you're isolated at home or quarantined, or maybe it's just something that you're interested in doing. One of the things during this coronavirus outbreak that has really, I think, caught people by surprise, at least home bakers, is that everyone's bought flour. People have suddenly decided, you know what? I'm going to learn how to make my grandma's apple pie or something like that. The issue with the apple pie is how often do you actually have pie? There's nothing wrong with trying to make apple pie, but as far as something that impacts your daily life, not much impact learning how to make apple pie. However, there are some things that could impact your daily life, like coffee, which is what I'm going to talk about. Roasting your own coffee beans. Now, whether you use a drip coffee machine, some form of a pour over, some sort of cold brew container, or maybe you love the French press, the thing in common with all these, of course, are the coffee beans. And I'm not going to get into the grind. People recommend certain kind of grinders. What I'm going to talk about today is how you can take green, unprocessed, unroasted coffee beans and get your very own coffee beans. These are fairly freshly roasted, almost 48 hours, which for me is about the time I allow after roasting before I grind. And the way to do that, to get into the game that I'm reviewing today, is the Nesco Coffee Roaster. There's a couple Nesco Coffee Roasters. This is the cheap one. It holds about 4 ounces of green coffee beans. It only has a medium and dark if you like the light roast. You have to time it and click the cool down button before it roasts past the point you want. But this is the roaster, and so maybe you've looked at this. I think I got this $65 maybe on Wayfair, but you can find this very reasonable. That may be kind of expensive to get into the coffee roasting game for some of you. But if you drink coffee every single day and you're at all interested in controlling more the flavor profiles because you're buying the green coffee beans directly from certain places, from certain altitudes that have certain flavor profiles, and you don't want them over roasted, you want the light roast, but you can only find it in medium or whatever, this is the sort of thing maybe you're interested in getting into. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the features of this, show you a quick roast. It's not perfect, but it could get you in the game. Stick around. So again, here is the roaster. You'll see again the dark roast, the medium roast, and the cool down buttons. Really all there is to this is you put in your beans, plug it in. If you want dark roast, push the dark, and it just goes away. You want medium roast, push medium. Maybe at the end you want your beans cool down extra, which also cools down the machine, push cool down. Just to look inside, it's kind of this nice interior, and you can see, I don't know if you call those baffles, where the air would come out and circulates your beans. That way they're more evenly roasted. Dog hair on there already. And then you have the lid, which catches kind of your chaff coming off the beans as they roast. So it's just kind of this lid. I need to clean this after last time. But that's actually a good example. It just shows the chaff. And of course this will sit right on top of here. And as the beans are being blown around, the chaff blows up and gets caught in this ring. Now, of course, to make these, you're going to need some of the green coffee beans. These are actually from, you can actually see here, Berman Coffee Traders. It was just on sale, special, which if you're just trying this out, I would recommend you get something like that. Just something cheap, try it out, see if you like it. But part of this is, it is going to be really important for you to weigh out your green coffee beans. Again, the machine, the roaster, highly recommends that you don't put more than 4 ounces in there. This is taped shut, of course. So you're going to want your scale and measure out at most 4 ounces. Good enough. Now I've seen where people have reviewed this and said they've done lower amounts, lower weights of the, I don't know if you want to call them raw green beans, to get a more even roast because the air is able to circulate better. But I'm not even trying that. I'm happy with it as it is. All right, so after you have weighed out your beans, you can do what I did, and I chose a nice glass bowl to pour the weigh the beans in because it looks nice for the camera, but really, actually, not the best thing to pour it into this. So I transferred that over to a 2-cup measuring cup. So maybe you should just do that to start off. You have to remember you are roasting, which is essentially a controlled burn, if you will, of beans. And so there is odor that comes off. Some of the higher end machines have things built in to really reduce the odor. So if you're doing this at home, I actually recommend doing it under a microwave, something that vents well, and preferably not the venting that's actually just blowing air around the room to circulate, but one that actually pulls the air in and the air is sucked out of the house, which is what I have here. And so you can set it up under that or take it out into a garage. Wait until your wife's gone, maybe when you do it. My wife just left, so now is a great time for me to do this and show you just kind of the roasting process. And we'll get some close-up shots of the roasting through a little glass viewer, I guess, they have on the top. I did remember to wipe these out. And by the way, the chaff catcher and the cover here, it's kind of like lint in a dryer. You don't want to let it build up too much because it becomes kind of a hazard as far as burning, starting a fire or something. And so that's the last thing you want to do in your house, particularly when it's so easy and accessible to clean. All right, so again, we got the buttons here. I got the plug. When you plug this in, you'll see that it'll beep, and these will flash blue. I don't know if the camera's actually picking that up. Here, I'll move up on this. You can kind of see that. You can also see some of the unclean stovetop. My wife would love that. Another reason to do this when she's not here. So it just flashes blue. You take your lid off. Grab your beans. I'll pour them in the top here. And I can just show that. They're down in there. Put your lid back on. It does kind of pop in a certain spot. I always do the medium roast. When you push it, it'll turn red and start blowing. And at that point, I'll turn on the vent just to get it ready. Now I'm sure you can kind of hear me over this. The question you might have is how loud is this actual unit? I kind of describe it as a quiet vacuum cleaner, which isn't quiet, but isn't crazy loud. I'm talking loud, but I'm not yelling, and hopefully the microphone's picking this up just fine. My wife was, blow drying her hair earlier. This is way quieter than a blow dryer. So it's not horrible. It is something you could probably do if someone was sleeping in another part of the house, as long as they weren't a really light sleeper. But anyhow, we'll just keep track of the progress and I'll show you how it goes. it finally finishes, you can see it just goes back to the flashing blue, but that looks like it's done. Let's see what we got here. There is a little handle here. That off. Kind of look in there. We'll pour these out to see better how well this turned out. So you can see this roasted darker than what I would have expected. But you can kind of see it's not too bad. Alright, so we got our fresh beans. The cool down feature, you might have noticed, it went from red to blue. That's when the cool down starts. It does a pretty good job of cooling them down. I would not say they're cooled, and so sometimes you might want to spread them out on like a baking tray or something like that. But I have a glass container that was pretty cool that I stuck them into, so I'm kind of counting on this bringing the temperature down. Pretty simple, really. And you get yourself some fresh beans to grind up, and they do recommend you wait a little bit because carbon dioxide and kind of gases that are the byproduct of the roasting are actually being released. So if you put it in a container, don't get one that has like a, I don't know if you can see this. If you get a container, don't get one don't get one that's airtight, because you actually want initially a little bit of space for those gases to be released out of your container. Later on, more long-term storage, you'd probably want something more airtight. But of course, really, with something like this, the ideal would be to grind the amount of beans that you're going to use within the week. So let's suppose these that I just roasted, I don't use for 48 hours. Again, that's kind of my preference. If I don't use them for 48 hours, I will probably want to use them in the next 72 hours after that. So essentially, from roast till I finish this little 4-ounce batch, 5 to 6 days at most, and that way you really are getting the freshest product. Because if you're going to go through the trouble, why not just enjoy it as fresh as possible? Some of the things with coffee beans that are freshly roasted that I've noticed, you do get a little bit more of, if it's supposed to be fruity, you taste that a little bit more. If it's supposed to be floral, you'll taste that a little bit more. Also, something you might not realize until you really have very freshly roasted beans, there's some of the bitter and overly earthy tones that you kind of get out of coffee are actually kind of removed. You can still get earthy tastes, but usually it's a more bitter. I'm sure there's a specific word for it, and I don't know what it is. But it's something you'll notice where it seems like a really smooth cup, and it doesn't leave kind of that bitter aftertaste that you might get with coffee that's been sitting in a bag for a month that you've been working on or something like that. Anyhow, so that is the Nesco coffee roaster. Okay, I guess actually one last thing. This is still kind of warm, so don't go to empty your cover right away. Wait just a little bit. But I thought I'd go ahead and show you how much actually gets caught in here. You would have seen that initially the beans don't circulate that well when they're green, because they're small, dense, hard, moisture is trapped in there. As they heat up and the moisture escapes, You might have actually caught it on the camera, the popping. They kind of call that the first crack in roasting. It's kind of like popping popcorn. In fact, if you go on YouTube, maybe you're watching this on YouTube, I guess, you can actually find people who try to roast their coffee beans in popcorn poppers. I get they're called poppers. But anyhow, so here's what you get. You get all the chaff and everything in there. And usually you'll get, one or two beans in here. I actually don't see any beans in here this time. These aren't beans. Those are kind of part of the bottom helps control where it sits when you put it on the roaster. But you get all this chaff, and you'll want to dump that out and clean that out. Clearly, you don't want to leave that in there and do another roast. If you need more than 4 ounces, they do recommend, I don't know if you leave 20 minutes maybe between roasts. That way the machine can cool down enough and not overheat. Anyhow, it keeps me happy. It's something to do. I will warn you again that roasting coffee beans the smell is not the same as freshly ground coffee. It is a much smokier, burnt. It can be unpleasant, particularly if you're doing a dark roast. I think it's okay, personally, but I could see where someone might not like it. But anyhow, that is again, Nesco Coffee Roaster.